Welcome to the second of two forums on poisoned land, poisoned water, the story of ground and water pollution in and around Badin, North Carolina. This is a presentation of the Reimagine America project, which is dedicated to the eradication of systemic racism. I am Jim Beard, the co-chair of the Environmental Justice Committee. This evening, you will hear more information from various individuals with direct knowledge of the pollution and racial disparities related to Alcoa and their Badin, North Carolina plant. This forum comes from the Environmental Justice Committee, which deals with racial inequities in environmental policies and actions which adversely affect Black and Brown communities. The focus of tonight's forum will be on the racial issues in pollution produced by Alcoa. Our forum tonight will be moderated by the Reverend Janet Garner-Mullins. Reverend Garner-Mullins has a Master of Divinity degree from Hood Theological Seminary in Salisbury, and has both bachelor's degree and master's degree from the University of Phoenix. She is a retired insurance claims professional and is now a public inspirational and motivational speaker, as well as a social justice advocate. She is a faith-based ministry leader. She serves in various leadership roles, including chair of the Coalition for Truth and Justice and the vice chair of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Black Heritage Committee. And before I turn it over to Reverend Garner-Mullins, let us take a moment for a prayer. Lord, we have these times to come together. We know there are things that go on that don't please you, Lord, and we try to unmask the situation so that the truth might be seen. We ask that you guide us and give us enlightenment as we explore these issues that cause pain to some people, that cause the situation to affect some people of color worse than others. Help us in this evening as we go through this forum to discern the truth. In God's name, amen.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, panelists and guests. Our first speaker for the evening via video is Ryke Longest. He serves as co-director of the Duke Environmental Law and Policy Clinic, which teaches law and graduate students how to assist nonprofit environmental organizations. Before he became a clinical faculty member, Ryke was a special deputy attorney general working for the North Carolina Department of Justice. During his career at NCDOJ, Ryke represented state agencies charged with protecting North Carolina's environment. Some of Ryke's research interests and specialties include air quality, criminal law, and environmental justice. Ryke also serves as director of clinics for Duke School of Law and has a secondary appointment to the faculty of the Nicholas School of the Environment. Following Ryke will be Bailey Hill. Bailey grew up in Davidson County, North Carolina, and attended High Point University, where she obtained a bachelor's degree in electronic media communications. She also has a master's degree in sustainability from Wake Forest University, where at Wake, she pursued educational opportunities that deepened her knowledge of environmental justice issues throughout North Carolina, concluding in the completion of a master's thesis about the legacy of pollution in West Badin. Bailey will have 7 minutes to speak. Our next speaker would be Mr. Macy Hinson. Macy was born on Lee Street in Badin, approximately 300 yards north of one of Alcoa Aluminum's dump sites, and is a longtime resident of West Badin. Macy attended the segregated West Badin High School, where he graduated in 1965. He began working at Alcoa in February of 1967 and remained there until he was laid off at the end of 1999. After Mr. Hinson, we would hear from Ms. Valerie Tysons, also a resident of West Badin. Each of them will have 5 minutes to speak. Our final speaker for the evening will be attorney Chandra Taylor-Sawyer. Chandra is a native of Kinston, North Carolina, and a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law. She is a senior attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center, which is a regional nonprofit focused on protecting natural resources and public health in the Southeast. As the leader of the SECL's Environmental Justice Initiative, she works in partnership region-wide with SELC staff and other associates to alleviate disproportionate burdens of environmental harm on communities of color. Her background includes such areas as water quality advocacy, natural resources restoration planning, waste site cleanup, and advocating for better industrial hog operations regulations. Her environmental justice experience includes teaching environmental justice law, policy regulations as adjunct faculty at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill School of Law. And Chandra has been doing this since 2016. And she also has 7 minutes to speak. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and it is my honor to be here with you all today to talk about some important matters. I am to give you the overview, history, and legal landscape of Badin, West Badin, and Alcoa's Badin works. We're not going to start at the beginning of history. Humans have been in the Badin area, documented through artifacts, at least 10,000 to 12,000 years. But beginning in 1913, a French company, Aluminum Française, began the process of building a aluminum manufacturing facility, and they named the town Badin after one of the engineers for the French aluminum company. But the Taylor-Sawyer Power Company, which was a subsidiary of Alcoa, purchased all of the assets from the Aluminum Française in the 1915 timeframe. By 1920, Alcoa was, through Taylor-Sawyer Power Company, actively recruiting a workforce and building a company town around the Badin plant. And the Badin Bulletin from 1920, there are excerpts on this slide from that Badin Bulletin, was specifically a newspaper that helped advise people about what was going on in the town, but was also promoting the town and directly recruiting a Black workforce into a portion of the town, segregated portion of this company town that was specifically designed and built for the use of the Black workforce. And they actively recruited that into what was called the Colored Village, or North Badin. It also happens to be on the northwest side of Badin. This excerpt from the Badin Bulletin on the right explains a little bit of how they were promoting this as a opportunity for workers to purchase their own home from the company over time. This picture down in the lower left corner of this slide, this picture in the upper left corner shows some of the homes that were being advertised in the Badin Bulletin on the west side of Badin. On the west side of Badin, in this village, the names of the streets were after generals. On the east side of Badin, the names of the streets are after plant species. This is the plant itself as shown from a 1938 aerial in the lower left corner, and West Badin is over here in the lower left. East Badin is over in the right. For the next 5 and 7 decades, aluminum production went on at Badin, and 4 dams, started with 1 dam and went to 4 dams that created the electricity that was needed to power all of this activity. Along comes, and the settlement patterns, as we can see in this demographic picture on the left of this slide, shows you the segregation of the company town as it is today. So the legacy of that segregation that began in the 1920s continues in settlement patterns today, with this picture on the left side showing more recent census data at the tract level to show you how it is at the census block level, how West Badin is still today a segregated town. It's no longer segregated at law, but it is segregated factually. And we have an African-American population who have built businesses, built homes, and lived in this area now for decades and on through generations and generations of workers. In 1989, Alcoa, together with a group called Better Badin, Inc., designed a process for the incorporation of the town and the ending of the company town. It wasn't until 1989 that the town was turned over to become a private, from a private company town to being a public town. But when it was created, the town was divided into two residential voting districts, West Badin and East Badin. So the General Assembly is the one that condoned this in 1989. And they gave voting power upon recommendation of the committee, gave voting power in such a way that West Badin gets one resident elected to the town council, East Badin gets another, but 3 are elected at large. And since the African-American and West Badin population is a smaller portion of the overall population of Badin, this has adversely affected the representation of West Badin on the town council. The General Assembly also took away a power that's commonly given to towns, and that is the power to regulate industrial activity. On the right, you can see the excerpts from the law that was passed in 1989 that enacted these injustices. During this time, aluminum was being smelted. The lower left is an illustration of how an aluminum smelting pot is created. The upper right shows you what happens after smelting has gone on for a period of time. There's a waste product that's created. In the lower left, this waste product starts out as pure carbon blocks, but over time, impurities from the alumina ore, can be any form of metal that might be in the raw ore, ends up in these carbon cathodes. Also, cyanide is formed in that same process, and fluoride comes out of this electrolyte solution. So we have a combination of fluoride, cyanide, heavy metals, and something called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These, many of these are very hazardous chemicals that we think of in things like creosote, coal tar pitch. The spent pot liner you see here being jackhammered out of one of these liners is produced in large volumes each and every year from every one of these facilities. PCBs are also on the property as a result of the high volume of electricity that has to be used. This is an aerial photograph taken from one of the one of the cleanup maps that was produced by consultants, showing 3 areas on the property that have the largest concentration of that spent pot liner that is buried underground in unlined dumps. They are called North Plant Groundwater, Alcoa Badin Landfill, and Old Brick Landfill. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3. These are the largest dumps on the site, and they're still here, covered with dirt on hillsides, but not protected from the elements. As we see today, I'm going to show you just the North Plant. This is of the 3, 2 of them are located in the area known as West Badin. The third is in a remote location away from humans on the east side of the highway. So it would technically be in East Badin, but it has actually not got any neighbors. The North Plant groundwater is a place where waste was just dumped into low-lying areas off the back end of the existing storage areas. And it was right next to this area where swimming and recreation takes place. So this hazardous waste facility that we're talking about is directly adjacent to the areas where recreation and swimming took place on Badin Lake, which is of concern. This shows some of the topography. These are showing where dumping occurred on the north end. And it shows the direction in which spent pot liner had been dumped, and cyanide and fluoride is leaching out of it. These are not lined landfills. They are covered landfills, but the bedrock is flowing towards the lake in this northern portion. And with that, I will turn it over to a next speaker to give you some more details about the next topic. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Share my screen with you all. Okay, can everyone see this okay? Okay, awesome. So my name is Bailey. I'm the environmental justice advocate for Yakin Riverkeeper. And I will be using my time this evening to highlight the method of analysis by which the state of North Carolina evaluated the environmental impact of Alcoa's hazardous waste in West Badin and the area of Badin in North Carolina. So in a draft environmental justice report released by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality in October of 2022, the department concluded that they found no evidence of environmental injustice in the town of Badin. And this conclusion was based on their analysis of the area using EPA's guidelines for evaluation of the impact on people of color and low-income communities. So that they concluded that they conducted this environmental justice draft report as part of their ongoing stakeholder engagement process, and that all of the census tracts that they analyzed were generally similar to the state estimates for most data sets. So the department's use of the unit hazard coincidence method, basically analysts Mohai and Saha note that this does not account for the precise location of the hazard and cannot accurately reflect the level of impact on the surrounding community. They also found that for the nation's commercial hazardous waste facilities, application of the unit hazard coincidence method leads to an underestimation of the degree of racial and socioeconomic disparities due to the evaluation of larger geographic units, such as zip codes and census tracts, as opposed to the evaluation of individual neighborhoods. So this image right here was taken right from the draft report from NCDEQ, and it shows the two census tracts that they utilized to measure or estimate the environmental impact of this very small area, Badin, North Carolina. So as Ryke showed just a few minutes ago, this is the photo he was showing of the census block versus the census tract data. So you can see census tract is what they were using on this draft report, whereas census blocks really breaks down the area so you can actually see a more accurate spatial representation of who lives in this neighborhood and what percentage of people of color versus low income, and all of those demographics that really matter when you're trying to evaluate the environmental harm on a community. So the NCDEQ also analyzed a 1 mile radius of the area, with the center being the former Alcoa smelting plant. However, they noted that the EJ screen mapping tool that they used, it did not provide all of the data categories that were used in the analysis of the larger units. NCDEQ's draft report did not account for the placement of the solid waste management units, which are also known as landfills. They did not account for the concentration of hazardous waste buried throughout Badin, and they certainly did not account for the cumulative impact of environmental hazards on the Black residents of West Badin. And due to its historically and racially segregated company town, it's very important for us to bring to light these issues of historical relevance when it comes to analyzing who has been most impacted. So NCDEQ's draft report, it reveals a systemic issue underlying the way in which regulatory agencies estimate the impact of environmental hazards on vulnerable populations, particularly fence-line communities located adjacent to heavily polluting industries. It also calls attention to the need for a more accurate spatial evaluation that centers the community's lived experiences and identification of environmental concerns. Environmental justice cannot and will not be achieved without the meaningful involvement of affected community members. And that's why it's vital for the state of North Carolina and its regulatory agencies to meaningfully involve residents in their decision-making processes and operations. Community members are experts. And with that, I will pass the mic over to our experts for the evening that are currently on the panel.
Next would be Mr. Hinson and Ms. Tyson.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Macy Hinson. I was born and raised in the West Badin community. And in that area, Highway 740 runs between East and West Badin. The east side was primarily white, and the west side was black, where we all lived. Aluminum was made by Alcoa primarily in the West Baden community. They also created a 15 acres trash dump where people took their trash to this site, as well as Alcoa took trash to this site. They put spent carbon out there in that site, which is a hazardous waste made used when you make aluminum. They, as kids, we used to play in these areas, and there was a place where we used to pick up scrap metal and sold it for 5 cents a bucket to a gentleman by the name of Farmer Scott. And in the West Baden area, we had dirt alleyways, roads, and the roads were covered with oil that Alcoa used to make their aluminum, and it was just dumped out on the sites. We had, in the West Baden community, we had dirt roads and dirt alleyways, and it would get very dusty in there. To keep the oil down, keep it down, Alcoa would put PCB laden oil on the roads to keep it down so it wouldn't be so bad. The oil came from generator breakers and transformers that Alcoa used to transfer power throughout the plant site. And since that trash dump has been covered up, has been closed, Alcoa continually put dirt out there, mounds of dirt on top of the PCB laden oils, and said it does not hurt anything because it won't bother you because it's covered with mounds and mounds of dirt. PCB is a hazardous byproduct of making aluminum, and it does not go away. You can put dirt on top of it continually, and still the PCB laden oil will still be there and it will never dissolve. And which means that all of this hazardous dirt and whatever it is in the hazardous trash dump is covered up and buried. The simple solution would be to go into the trash dump and clean it up according to the Superfund site, according to the Superfund site, the way it was designated. It's to clean up a Superfund site, it would be in the range of $240+ million to do so. Now, in the West Baden community, we don't have $2 or $3 that we can use to clean that site up, but Alcoa has the funds and the means of doing so. Somehow or another, the old trash dump was taken off the Superfund site, and I don't know who did it, why they did it, or how they did it, but it's still there, but it was never uncovered or cleaned up. But the only way to me to clean it up is to go through the Superfund site and go into the West Baden area and clean up all of this area that is still covered up. Please put the old trash dump back on the Superfund site and go in and clean it up the correct way.
Hello, my name is Valerie LeGrand Tyson. And like Macy, I was also raised in West Bay. And I began my journey at Alcoa August the 7th, 1976. But before then, we noticed that on that trash pile site that he's been talking about, we saw trucks coming in and out of Bay 7 days a week. And they were just covering it up with dust. And my presentation today was to show you those guys, those men, some of those men that are pictured. I have pictures of some men on this side. You might not be able to see it, but they would show, sometimes they would be making a 25-year club. And that was a club that when you worked at Alcoa for 25 years, they will reward you with a week off and a check. But those men had no idea the poison that they was taking home to their wives, their children, and their grandchildren. And later on, you will see those same men that made that 25-year club being buried and being diagnosed with cancer. So when I began at Alcoa, I noticed that it was something that was causing these people, and not only me, it was other people that was hired at the time that I was, that all this contaminated soil and everything else they were killing people because they was having the same diagnosis. So all those men, including my father, he worked 44 years down there. And he had no idea. They didn't wear masks, and they didn't wear the proper protective clothing that would protect them against this hazardous contaminated soil. And so I started in the wood gang like everybody else, but I moved rapidly. One being the baking furnace on the north end of the plant. And I was considered, my classification was packer puller. And that same dust and that black carbon that the spit pot line was in, and the Boer gang people was up there. And when we began, we know that we had to get that poisonous, contaminated stuff that we was working in. We had to get it out of the plant because we wasn't making any headways with the leadership of the plant, okay? Because they're telling us, like they told us before, there's no hazardous waste. And what they began to do was tear down the buildings. But the land is still there. And we don't know where that water is going. They talk about Little Mountain Creek. We talk about the trash pile. But it's women that also died of that contamination. Because just like Mr. Hinson said, they would always do that contaminated stuff on second shift. We have been in there, me and Mr. Hinson and a few more, and saw where they dropped that contaminated stuff. And a lot of our community is dead. We would notice that when those men would try to do gardens, they were rotten. Tomatoes were rotten. Corn couldn't grow. They raised hogs in that same contamination. And like I stated before, they even gave those men, and they know that those brick was contaminated, and they gave them to them to do things like do their sidewalks, underpin their garages, and even bringing their clothes so that they can wash them with their children's clothes and the family clothes. That was causing women to have that cancer. We had just as many women died of cancer that never worked inside that plant, but the husbands that worked every day, first, second, and third, that were dying with cancer. They had no idea what they was working in until we start And believe me, when I said smuggle those things in, that contamination, we had to actually put it inside our clothing and smuggle it out. And until we got it outside that plant, we still can't prove anything. And you'll never find that it was called, that their cancer was caused by this contamination, but it was. And they'll say it, and they'll even say that we're fabricating lies on our core. But folk, I'm telling you, we're not fabricating any lies. Men have died, sons have died, grandchildren have died. No couples in Badin, none. And these people that broke those records for our core and never deserved to have died like that. And today, even today, we still have some of our brothers and sisters that are dying of that cancer, of that poisonous, contaminated stuff that we worked in, and we knew it was contaminated. We knew it was causing cancer. Everybody inside that plant knew it was causing cancer, some sort of cancer. We have more breast cancer in Badin and surrounding counties now. People are still losing their wives, still losing their children for this contamination. Yeah, they moved the buildings, but they didn't do anything with the land. They stacked that hill to call the trash pile 7 days a week, 7 days a week, but they didn't move that contaminated soil. And like I told you, the committee on the week before last, we need help down here. Alcoa is a big corporation, and they'll continue to say that there's no contamination where they test. And if they continue to let Alcoa do their own testing and how they test it, we'll never get nothing solved. So we need help, folks. We really need help. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Tyson, for what was a moving and touching presentation from you and Mr. Hinson. Thank you so much for your time. We will now hear from Attorney Sawyer.
Thank you, Reverend, and thank you so much, Ms. Valerie and Mr. Hinson. I am Chandra Taylor-Sawyer, and I have been working in West Badin on and off since 2012 as an attorney at Southern Environmental Law Center, leading our environmental justice initiative. My experience, I'd like to talk about the impact, what we have seen, what's left because of the contamination in West Badin. So you've heard so much from the prior speakers, but I think these action-driving discussions are important. And what we've seen from the past is that the organizing that has been driven by concerned citizens of West Badin, by all of the concerned citizens, that they've made progress through their organizing to get signage up on Badin Lake because of the contamination. Has the polychlorinated biphenyls, those PCBs, those cancer-causing chemicals that are in the lakes have made it such that people can't fish and eat the fish, eat more than a certain amount of fish. So small kids, pregnant women, there's actually signage on the lake. And because of that organizing, because of a notice and comment process, there are signs on the lake that the Department of Health and Human Services did put up. They're not easily visible, but they're there because of that organizing. But that's part of how we know that there's a problem. There are fish consumption advisories for polychlorinated biphenyls, known carcinogens, because of the organizing and advocacy of concerned citizens of West Badin. there was a Clean Water Act lawsuit that was filed because to drive getting at the chemicals that are coming out of the contaminated soil that were getting into the old pipes, the old stormwater system, and eventually getting into the lake. So cyanide and fluoride associated with what's in the soil, it was getting into the lake. Concerned citizens of West Badin filed a lawsuit, and their settlement did result in construction of a new stormwater drainage system that did reduce the amount of contaminants, but what's still left is that contaminated soil. It's still there. And what you did get to hear is that if this site were being addressed under the Superfund law, which is CERCLA, versus the other law, which is called RCRA, there would be, what is true is that there would be much more opportunity for public comment, for people to weigh in on the cleanup process. There would be many more timelines associated with addressing what you heard earlier, which are these three very contaminated hazardous waste sites that are on this property. But instead, this site is not being addressed under our Superfund law. And Superfund also, even though that law doesn't provide unlimited funds to address cleanup, there is a separate fund. Now, in this case, I think there is agreement that most people say we understand where this waste comes from and that there shouldn't be a question about who should be responsible for cleaning it up. But moving quickly to address it instead of waiting for it to continue to harm the environment and public health would be significant. And getting those funds back over time, it would be more important to address cleanup in the short term than to continue to let these contaminants leach into the environment. So listening to the appeal of getting this addressed under Superfund does seem to make sense. We are also in an environment now where there's an unprecedented amount of federal funding that has become available for our state and for municipalities to apply for assistance to help address what is harm in overburdened and underserved communities. Our recent budget the governor's budget has put in additional funds for municipalities like Stanley County to apply for technical assistance, to apply for these federal funds that are available through the Inflation Reduction Act to help overburdened, underserved communities like the community of West Badin, to address issues in the community, to help with improvement. So those are looking for solutions that actually help uplift communities are important, and that could be one of the ways to seek solutions that help assist communities. So there are government to government grants that there's a process that's open right now. It closes on April 14th, but the Inflation Reduction Act, those funds will be available through 2026. So there'll be other grant processes that are open. So that is another sidebar in terms of avenues that could be of assistance to communities like West Badin. But I think this really significant factor about people's lives, about the waste that remains, and about what we know to be true, which is there's a lot of hazardous waste that remains in West Badin, and there's what we know to be an actor that is in communication with our state DEQ that can be actively addressing this problem right now. And we, as an advocate, seeing Alcoa and DEQ work to address this problem now rather than wait to just let it stay there, would be the right thing to do, and now is the right time to do it.
Well, thank you all for this amazing testimony and your presentations. And we do have time for questions. I'm Jennifer Roberts. I have been the mayor of Charlotte. I've been a county commissioner for Mecklenburg County. And I'm one of the founders of the Reimagining America project, and I've been doing a lot of work in climate change. So these issues are near and dear to my heart, because anytime we have pollution, climate change just makes it worse, because we have floods and severe rainstorms and many things that make our waterways even less safe. So I'm going to take a couple of questions that I've seen, and one of the first ones was a good one. And what has the town council of Badin done, and do they need to be more vocal to be able to get some of those funds directed to the town? Can anybody answer that?
My name is Valerie Tyson again, and
Yes.
they are not that vocal. And yes, they can do more to for those grants and everything to kind of help the situation in Badin.
Also, the town of Badin is trying to get funds to build a community play site in front of Badin Lake. It's about a 14-acre site to attract people to come there. When I was working at Badin, there was a ditch that was 4 feet deep and 8 feet wide that was filled up with dirt to cover it up, and now it's only about 3 inches deep, 3 feet deep or less, to use all of the properties in front of the boat landing to promote a play site for the town of Badin. And we got a 15-acre trash dump full of hazardous material that needs to be cleaned up from the Superfund site or whatever that is still contaminated with anything that was used to make aluminum, because everything you make aluminum with ends up being a hazardous material, the byproduct.
We have a lot of questions, I think, that the lawyers might be able to answer as well. Why is there not the ability to, for the harm that people have seen in their health, why is there not an ability to bring a class action lawsuit against Alcoa? Or does anybody know the answer to that? Bailey or Chandra?
So I don't want to get out of my depth or outside of other people's representation agreements, but I'm not sure how many people, there's always the link of causation, the link between people being able to link their own health concerns to the actual. So they would have to be able to say, Alcoa caused my actual particular health concern, like somebody who is living today who has a health concern. So that would be a causation issue for someone living today. So I'm not certain that people who are living today would be making those same claims. and people who have already had cases that have been resolved may have had those cases resolved under terms that have already been negotiated.
So I understand our lawyers being a little concerned about what do you call it, non-disclosure. And so what I can explain is that if people have had individual lawsuits settled, often they sign a non-disclosure agreement, which means they can't tell anybody the terms of that settlement. It's part of how companies protect their reputation, which seems to me not really in the cause of justice, but legally they are allowed to do that. I feel for the community that
You have a raised hand.
I have a raised hand. Wow. Okay. We are using the chat and the Q&A feature because I don't think our technology allows us to unmute unless it's I'm sorry, it's one of our panelists, Macy or any of the folks.
Could I make
ahead.
some clarification on some of the things that you were saying earlier? My name is Richard Lee. I'm an ex-Alcoa employee also. I was involved in a lawsuit against Alcoa. Well, we had Mona Lisa Wallace to represent us. And in that agreement, it was determined that if anybody in our family came down with any type of counsel, and we could relate it back to the stuff that we carried home to our families when we washed our clothes, with our kids' clothes and our wives and whatever, that Alcoa would be reliable for those damages. Now, the ones of us that really knew about the deal between Alcoa and Mona Lisa Wallace, it was kind of like more, it wasn't a hush mouth thing, but it was kind of like in a little circle. And a lot of the people that's going through problems in the community, they don't know nothing about the agreement that was made between us and Alcoa when Alcoa made the settlement with us about, like, I got asbestos scars in my lungs. Some of the guys had asbestos. You know, for whatever procedures that they diagnosed us with, we were paid based on the percentage of what we had in our bodies. And upon the agreement that was supposed to be made with Mona Lisa Wallace, were that if anybody in our family came down with any kind of counsel, that if we could relate it back, bring it back to Alcoa and prove that it come from the things that we carried home and put in the washing machine with our kids and our wives and whatnot, that Alcoa would be reliable for it. But I have yet to know about anybody that's went forward with the process of being able to go to Mona Lisa Wallace, which I think, excuse my expression, done a poor job at letting the Alcoa employees and the families know what the exposure level were, and what kind of agreements had been made with Alcoa. And a lot of people don't know nothing about it. And those people that's down with breast cancer, like Val said, we did a survey. Over 85% of the Black men who worked at Alcoa died with cancer. Now we got a problem in the community. About 40 to 30% of the Black women are coming down with cancer. Never been in that plant. And we know that this stuff is coming from what we carried home. My ex-wife just died about 3 months ago with brain cancer. And I know in my heart that it came from some of the stuff that I carried home and washed in the clothes with them and whatnot. But I didn't have no way to prove it. There wasn't no way for me to prove it, because when I was trying to tell her what was going on, she was just like everybody else. She was in denial. So we don't have the means or the resources to get the word out to these people and let these people know what's going on within the community. And like Val said earlier, when we start speaking out, then we're classified as being troublemakers, liars, or whatever you might want to call it. And after they throw that word out there for a while, even by some of the people in the Black community, they seem to see us the same way. They're troublemakers or somebody trying to create some kind of disturbance for Alcoa, because Alcoa's so-called generosity. See, Alcoa got a way to buy you out. they come in our community and do certain little things and whatnot and get a couple of people on their side. And then those 2 or 3 people make decisions for a community that the community don't know nothing about until it's publicized. So that's kind of why we can't really and truly get Alcoa to do a whole lot, because they see us as troublemakers. They see us as being somebody that's fighting a cause for whatever they think the reason might be. Like Macy said, I worked at the dam, Macy worked at the dam. We know what we put in the lake. You know, we know what we put in the ground.
Yeah.
But for some reason, another Alcoa saying, hey, this thing, it don't exist. And every time we run up against them, it's just like a rock and an egg. We always burst because we don't have the material to fight them with.
Well, Mr. Leake, you have done a terrific job of laying out for us the problem with dealing with a company town, where there is a dependency relationship with a company that did employ people for years. And I'm sorry that you're feeling like you're being shut out from other residents who may have gotten settlements. And I'm also sorry for your loss from your ex-wife recently. And this is, you are giving us the human stories behind what happens in a company town where they are pushing regulations and whatever influence they can to skirt issues. Our last webinar said that of the 16 violations they've had over the years, they've paid less than $10,000 in damages, which it seems very unjust. We had a couple of questions about federal and state legislation. Somebody who clearly knows who the House and Senate representatives are for Stanley County put that or asked, why don't we get Representative Wayne Sasser or Senator Carl Ford, who represent Stanley County? Have they been responsive? Have they listened, at least for DEQ action or input? That was one question. And then another question was whether somebody has actually applied for federal funds for that IRA money, or is that in process? So sorry, I asked 2 questions at once. We'll start with the second one. Does anybody know, is there an active application for the town of Badin to receive some of that federal funding?
I don't know, but I can tell you this, that I'm changing the subject again. From the people that worked at Badin, there aren't but a few of us left, white or black. And it appears to me that Alcoa is waiting for all of us to be non-existent or pass away. And then all of us have been buried and the subject has been buried. I hope somewhere there is somebody in the West Badin community who will pick up the torch and continue to carry on what we are doing or what we're trying to do.
We had an answer in the chat that says Representative Sasser is supportive, but saying that he can't do anything, that his hands are tied. And I'm not sure that's entirely true, but you do have to get a majority number of votes to get legislation passed and to get a budget passed. So that is one answer from the chat about some of the local action. Our state legislature, by the way, does have an environment committee. Both the state house and the state senate have committees that look at environmental regulations and funding of the Department of Environmental Quality. So, for those who are interested in calling or writing state legislators, it's not just Sasser and Wayne Sasser and Carl Ford, but there are a number of folks in the House and the Senate. You can go online and look those up. And those are also folks that you can call. And I was on a webinar recently where somebody recommended that the emails are not looked at because they get thousands of emails. A phone call or a written letter is actually the best way to get someone's attention. So you can look for the members of those environment committees at the state level. I'm reading a few more questions. What about the current health concerns for folks, children, et cetera? Are children seeing that? Are children moving away? How does the community feel about their families still being in the Badin Lake area?
Children go off to those that leave Badin and go to college. They never come back. They don't have anything to come back for. Just like that water park that they mentioned. They're dead set on that water park, but all that ground is contaminated. He gave you a measurement of the dimension and how it's been out there. But what do they have to come back for? Because they're afraid that they know it's cancerous in this town. Why haven't we moved? We're trying to do something about it. But everywhere we turn we can't do anything. My hands are tired. You're telling lies. Alcoa was good to us. Yeah, they paid good because this was a small town. They paid good, but they didn't tell us they was killing us. They didn't tell our parents that they was killing us. So you see this small number of people here. You see it. You see it. A company like Alcoa, you need power. You need more people to sit down. We can write letters, sure. We can make shirts, sure. Concerned citizens of West Bay. But to be said you are telling lies, we're fabricating all that, it gets frustrating. To me, that's just me. But yet, people are still dying. People are still dying. Yeah, we have children. I have a godson that got lungs like an old man. He's going through treatment now at Duke Hospital. He can't even hardly breathe, but yeah, he push on. He's pushing on. But to be told in your face, there's nothing else that can be done. And we've been singing this song for years. But it don't seem like we're dying out quick. Because I don't feel no ways tired. And I'm going to keep talking until I can't talk. For those people that can't talk. You understand me?
Ms. Tyson, we feel your pain. You are so expressive in talking about your family and the children. We have a lot of actually suggestions in the chat. Apparently the EPA is having an environmental justice virtual meeting tomorrow, and Reverend Garner-Mullins put the Zoom ID number in the chat. So if you go into your Zoom account and enter that number, you can join that tomorrow. There's also an in-person public hearing this Saturday on Executive Order 246, which is also the environmental justice community input session. And Renia has put a link in the chat that that you can register for that meeting. Reverend Garner-Mullins, you know what time the EPA virtual meeting is tomorrow? Maybe you can put that in the chat as well.
Yes, let me look up that and I'll put that in the chat. I do apologize for not putting that in.
No worries. There's also a question, is there any kind of investigation of the effects of the continued toxins? One thing that has been in the news recently is the EPA is, or the Biden administration is planning to move on forever chemicals, which includes PCBs and PFAS. And that is, I don't know what stage that's in, but has anybody heard about progress there? And does that have any application or implications for the Badin community? Bailey, you nodded your head. You've heard about this new EPA.
Yes, I've heard about it. I don't know details, but I think the more that we can share information about what we see happening in West Badin, the more we can share community stories, then I think it'll put pressure on local politicians. Even though they say their hands are tied, then you know, hopefully it'll get to the right person, and maybe they can do something while their hands are tied. Question mark. I don't know, but yeah, just I say the more people who find out about this, the better.
So the APA meeting is from 2 to 4 Eastern time tomorrow. And I would just echo what Bailey said. The elected officials will say their hands are tied, but if they are hearing from enough constituents frequently enough and advocates like the Riverkeeper, like the Southern Environmental Law Center, like the Reimagining America Project, things can move and they can change, but it does feel like it takes forever sometimes. And I just feel for the 3 of you folks who are in the Badin community speaking with us tonight, because we feel your trauma, we feel your fatigue, and we feel for your families. And my hope is that there are enough folks online tonight and who watch it later that will be motivated to call, to join a group that is working for justice in the Badin community. There's the Protect Badin Lake group. There's the Southern Environmental Law Center. There's the Yakin Riverkeeper, Sierra Club. There are quite a few. Environment North Carolina. There are a lot of nonprofits that are working for the environment, and it's one way to help bring collective voices to the table. There are a couple of more comments in the chat. The Concerned Citizens of West Badin. Sorry, I gave the wrong title. This is an interesting one. Why is DEQ allowing Alcoa to do its own testing, and they're not bringing in a third party to do that, or even having DEQ do it themselves?
We think it's real simple because, like I told you earlier, we always hear about what Alcoa is doing in the community. We just heard a while back how they donated land to the county to do habitat houses, and how they invested $45,000 in the business park that we sitting here talking about, discussing. And all those things seem like a good charity work. Good charity work. And then you got a lot of people that, like I say, ain't never been in that plant, don't know who went through inside of that plant. So to them, Alcoa doing good deeds. You know, it's good deeds. They don't realize that Alcoa is buying into them. You know, they don't understand that because they have never been really and truly introduced to the exposure. You know, they know it's some problems out here. They know it's a problem. They know that. But to know the standards of them, we don't have the resources to really and truly do the type of communication, the type of broadcast that we need to get to the people to know what's really and truly happening. And like we're saying now, we've been all in this battle with Alcoa kind of like for quite some time. And most of the people that's involved, like you said earlier, they dead, they gone. They gone. And it seemed to me the same way that they just said earlier, that Alcoa trying to wait that we all die out. I just came from a meeting with Alcoa last week. You know, where they were talking about the progress that's being made on the business park, talking about the progress that's being made with the new Navy process factory they come out building and whatnot, and how it would generate this and how it would generate that. And then was later on some of the same individuals that were working with Alcoa were trying to convince me, for one, to come back to the Black community and get them on the way. And when I spoke in terms of the racism, it was like, hey, I'm tired of hearing about racism. You always hollering racism. Hey, look, you ain't never been in the Black community. You know, you came through that. You know, you ain't had to breathe and live what we lived in the Black community. You know, you might have heard us talk about it, but to have lived it. And then you want me to accept the things that you imposed on us because we didn't have the resources to fight back with, and say, well, that's okay now. You know, that's all this happened, that's good. And I'm supposed to come back to the community and tell them how good Alcoa is when I know that Alcoa has destroyed the community. And that's the kind of thing they do. You know, they know Macy, they know myself. We worked at the dam. So we already know what kind of chemicals is in that water. I know I worked in pot line, cement pot line. I dumped the cement pot line up there in the village and all that stuff, you know, because that was my job. But when we sit here and say things against this or things that we did, it's just like they got a sheet of paper where somebody done wrote out all their information. And it's just like their so-called information is outweighing the truth. You know, they'll label us, oh, all these fabricants and all this kind of stuff about what Alcoa is doing and all that. Hey, and then most of the meetings that we go to is full Black in a big room with Alcoa so-called, I call them associates. That's Macy, myself, one of the Black town councilmen, and I just met this other lady. I don't know where she came from, but she seemed to be. What's her name?
I don't know her name.
But anyway, she working with the Habitat and some type of school program that they got for unfortunate kids. But I'm saying that's the way they do. They get 3 or 4 Blacks on a panel, and then they'll put in their little paperwork. Well, the community is doing this, and the community ain't doing nothing because the community don't even know what's going on.
That's not a good percent.
They don't know what's going on. And when we speak out, when you speak out against, wait a minute, hey, you spreading lies, you know, and it's sad because, like Val said earlier, we're running out of options.
Yeah.
We don't even know where to go. We don't know what to do. As of right now, we just like out in limbo because we don't know who to contact. We don't have the financial means to get the type of representation that we think we're entitled to as far as the community is concerned. We don't have access to those political leaders that's making these decisions like some of the other people do. So, we don't have nowhere to go.
Well, thank you for your passionate explanation of how the citizens in Badin feel. And we are unfortunately almost out of time, but I want to give every panelist 1 minute, maybe 30 seconds to say one thing you'd like to see change in the next 6 months for what's going on with Badin.
Clean up those sites.
Yep.
That's all we ask. Clean up those sites in our community. That's all we ask. You know, we fight for our kids and our grandkids because it's too late for us.
Yep.
But the ones that are coming after us, clean it up for them. That's all we ask.
All right, thank you, Macy.
Yeah, the West Badin community where the old trash dump is used to be part of a Superfund site.
Mhm.
Somehow, somebody took it off through EPA or whomever to not have it on the Superfund site, and that's why therefore it was taken off. Now you have a Badin Business Park for a company that's coming in that's going to make parts for that make military parts.
Mm.
And they said they're coming in under Chapter 11.
Mm.
What is that doing for the town of Badin? Nothing. Just put us on the Superfund site and get rid of that big pile of stuff down there.
I think definitely more press coverage around this. Anything to elevate the community's voices that we heard from tonight, because they shouldn't have to keep doing this. And the fact that they are doing this is awesome and wonderful, but y'all shouldn't have to be here tonight. And so we definitely want to get the younger generation involved to carry on this this legacy, so that hopefully in the future there will no longer be that legacy of pollution, and instead we'll see environmental justice realized within that community. But it's going to be a long, hard fight.
I will repeat Mr. Hinson's request and ask that our Environmental Protection Agency get re-involved to reopen the petition for the Superfund, so that this site be put on the national priorities list. The reintroduction of the Environmental Justice for All Act will be happening. We see more opportunities for addressing these concerns for overburdened, underserved communities, and that should happen for the concerned citizens of West Baden community.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Tyson, I think I skipped over you. Your last words.
Like Brother Hinson said, put us back on the Superfund, clean up what you messed up.
Yep. Thank you for this that's a terrific summary of our marching orders, all those listening. We are just so grateful. There is work to do, but collective voices can make a difference. It feels like a tough road sometimes. I'm going to turn it back over to James Beard to close us out with an inspirational prayer or spiritual. We need hope. So over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. It's been a good evening. Very, very insightful to some of the folks who actually experience this problem and are in the middle of it. We hope that we can get something to move and things to change. I would like to leave you then with a word of prayer in closing. We pray that the discussions and information that was put forth tonight will enlighten us and give us some glimpse of your desire, O God, for justice among your children. As we go forward, give us direction and guidance in how we might promote equality and harmony for all who are in your creation. Help us to value your creation and act in such a way that the environment will be protected for all and not just those with lighter skin. We pray this in your name. Go with us. Amen.